Welcome to segment 3 of a series we're calling Emotions and the Aging Process. I'm Naomi Arenberg with Dr. Ron Sepitelli. And Ron, let's get right into things. First with a little review of where we were in the last segment. You were telling us a fascinating story about a patient of yours. Is patient the right term these days? Client, patient,
or
woman?
resident. She was in a nursing home. They're called residents in nursing homes.
Named Mary, who, at the risk of belittling her, and I don't mean it that way at all, her story is almost a fantasy. It's a transformative story. So review for us just a little bit about Mary.
Okay, Mary was an 88-year-old woman who had been living in a nursing home for about 7 or 8 months before I started working with her. She had kept her eyes closed shut the entire time. She was hallucinating. She was on, as the family said, massive doses of Haldol. She was a complainer. She complained about the food. She complained about the staff. She complained about how they brushed her teeth. She complained about how they toileted her. She did all of these things, and she was, she couldn't swallow her medications, and that was really frustrating to the staff. And they tried all these various techniques and gimmicks that they have to get people to, and she had a very, very difficult time doing that. And she was very frustrating to the staff. They would comment about her with rolling eyes or, oh, it's her again, make things like this, which is understandable. She was a very frustrating resident in the nursing home.
But they were all frustrated. She wasn't happy, her family wasn't happy, and the staff wasn't happy.
That's correct.
So you happened to be there at one particular time, and you began this turnaround for Mary, who discovered something very important about herself through music.
Well, let me correct one thing you just said.
Sure.
I did not begin anything, a turnaround with Mary. Mary did it. That's all I did was listen to her. And, of course, there's a specific way that I listened to her, and what that listening did, it allowed Mary to put all her thoughts and feelings into language. I never judged her, I never valued her, I never tried to change her or help her. Okay, I just listened to her. And over time, she slowly revealed more about her life and about what actually was happening in the present. What was happening in the present, all these symptoms and all the problems she had were directly related to her past history.
And I think from time to time you asked key questions. Well, one of them that we might get to now is, why was music so important to her?
Yes. That happened actually late in my working with her. It actually happened in 6 days before she died. And she had told me a couple of things about her life and how much her life was now so important to her, and this was the happiest time in her life and so forth. And there was a silence, and I asked her why music was so important to her, why she really liked music. And she said that her mother did a lot of terrible things to her when she was growing up, and they really hurt her. But one thing her mother did was sing to her when she put her to bed every night. So Mary said that singing made her think about the better parts of her mother. And
That's very beautiful.
And this is really the human experience. If we can get to the better parts of ourselves and the better parts of our people, life will be much better for us.
And again, just to review, the music that Mary got to, really made her own, was a lot of repertoire from the Great American Songbook. She loved Sinatra and the Rat Pack and all of those guys, and she went from being kind of just totally in her own little world, her own cocoon, to belting out songs for the staff, the residents. She was having a great old time and taking music lessons.
Absolutely right. When I first met her, her outfit for the day would be her bathrobe or her nightgown, and when she would be singing these songs, she would be in a full three-piece suit, professional suit, just wailing away at this music. And not only that, she of course practiced them during the month, practiced the songs, and also as Mary got to better parts of herself, she became much more open and much more connected to the staff. And she went from someone they didn't like to someone they would talk about that she's funny, she's great to be around, and then aides actually enjoyed her.
Now, it strikes me, I know we can't digress, but it strikes me so deeply. I want to say the kind of situation you're talking about and the kind of therapeutic intervention, the listening and getting to the better parts of the self, that's true of everyone. Often in the aging process, we're making people be on different teams. We have the family and the professional caregivers and the patient or the resident, and instead of all being on the same team with that goal, one of the goals being, how can we all get to the better parts of ourselves to make a great, strong team? We end up being adversaries.
Well, that's a great point you're making, Naomi. What we need to do that is first, we need to be listened to. Not only does the resident or Mary need to be listened to, but the staff needs to be listened to, the administration needs to be listened to, everyone needs to be listened to. Recently, I was asked to go to an assisted living facility to talk to the staff, some residents, and family about caring for the caregiver. Okay, that was the title of it. So we got in a circle and we started chatting. So now you get staff members here, family members here, and the residents. And what came out that was shocking to both the family and the caregivers was that the residents said clearly that being in an assisted living place, that most of their focus was about their past. They kept thinking about their lives in the past because there wasn't much for them to look forward to. Okay? Now, that also is very important to know, understand, and look what happened with Mary. When she was given something to look forward to, everything changed.
And her family was a key part of that.
Absolutely.
We're here in good part to talk about the role of family and to incorporate in the way we think of family as certainly important as family, also as caregivers.
Yes. And in the case of Mary, her family was absolutely wonderful for her. They had a lot of conflict with the nursing home when they first started. When I first started working with her, they actually called me and asked me if they were going to move her to a different nursing home, would I work with her in the new nursing home? They were very understandable people, though, and I talked to them that, this is something that can be fixed, okay, can change, and moving to another nursing home, the geographical cure wasn't really going to happen. So she ended up staying there, and then her family ended up with a wonderful relationship with her caregivers, with the nursing home, and they all worked together. That's what's great about the nursing home. Everyone worked together.
So the family became, the family members were trying to play a positive role, weren't really sure how to do it. It sounds as though you came in as a facilitator. Mm-hmm. Would that be accurate?
Right.
And fortunately, Mary did have this devoted family, despite all of the hard times they'd been through. So that was really key.
Yes.
In her progression to really discovering her better parts.
Right, right.
What can we learn from that? Do you have any other words of advice or a recap about what specifically we could learn from the role of Mary's family?
Right, there's something very important, is that the family also was not able to listen to Mary. Now, Mary had events that happened in her life that she would not tell her family. She's not going to tell them that.
Her children or grandchildren?
Children, right, and so forth. A family, again, was trying to help Mary. So when she would complain about something, they would go to the administration and complain to the administration, thinking they were helping Mary. And actually what they were doing was adding to the stress and the conflict that was going on. So when the family, when I started meeting with Mary, and she had these changes immediately, everything calmed down, and then they were able to work together, the family and the staff. So, and one other most important point is that when a nursing home resident is acting out, whether it's crying or yelling or not eating or doing something, if there is nothing that's immediately happening, if someone didn't slap the nursing home resident in the face, let's say, okay, if we don't know they can't understand what's happening with the resident, most likely it has something to do with their past, something in the present that's triggered that. Okay, and so what happens again with Mary? So when that happened, the interventions were to try to change Mary's feeling. That's why she got on the drugs, okay? And that's why they did all this kind of trying to coerce her into doing different things, take the medications or eat and so forth.
To get her regimented to the nursing home routine.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Speak a little bit more about her family. Who were the family members there for her?
Well, basically it was her daughter that was there. It came quite often, and her grandchildren would come as well. Her daughter was devoted to her. Her daughter actually took care of her siblings when she was 9 years old, because Mary nor her husband could get out of bed at times.
Because she was so saddled with emotional issues?
That's right. She just couldn't do it.
Wow.
Okay, neither her husband or, And so her daughter became devoted to her in the nursing home. And once Mary started getting better, and this was really interesting about the daughter, was that she was able to understand what Mary really needed, what would really be helpful to her. Like she realized that as she started meeting with me and started getting involved in the music, when Mary said she'd like a new suit, she knew that was important to Mary. So she had like 3 or 4, these 3-piece beautiful suits, and the daughter would, buy those for her.
So it sounds important to me to have at least one family member, one or more family members, who will really listen and be willing to change their thinking, who will be open and receptive and have the time to do that.
Yes.
I think time is an important factor here.
Yes, and her daughter came quite often, though that's not always necessary for family members to come, every day of the week, okay? As a matter of fact, I've seen a case where a man came to see his wife 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, for years. His wife was in a coma, and he died before she did.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's, you gotta think about staying healthy yourself as a family. It's very stressful to have a family member in a nursing home.
Let's repeat that because it's so important. It's very stressful to have a family member in a nursing home, and therefore you have to stay strong yourself.
Absolutely. What caregivers need to do, and what's often misunderstood by caregivers, I'm talking like, it's even professional caregivers, but family caregivers, is that they must take care of themselves first. Absolutely take care of themselves first. And that is often not done. There's research that shows if a person goes home into a family and there's one basic caregiver, that the health of the caregiver declines faster than the health of the person being cared for.
I'm going to repeat that too. The health of the caregiver tends to statistically decline faster than the health of the person being cared for.
That's right.
That's a powerful statement.
Yes. If there's one primary caregiver. Yeah. So what really needs to happen is you need, I think Hillary Clinton wrote the book of, it takes a family to...
it takes a village.
The village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village to care for an elderly person or a disabled person also.
Mm-hmm. This is segment 3 of Emotions and the Aging Process. We're talking with Dr. Ron Ceppetelli. We spent our first few minutes talking about Mary, a patient who had an outstanding outcome, an outstanding transformation, and family caregivers. And Ron, we've had some very interesting questions from some viewers. And I'm going to try and get to these in order. Caring for a spouse after a stroke. The patient says, I had a stroke and I feel angry that I didn't take care of myself. Depressed that I will never be the same and guilty about what I'm doing to my wife. Will anything change? This is heartbreaking.
Yes, but that is common for stroke victims to say that, because they're now in a position that they have probably thought about or tried not thinking about in their life. So now you're, say paralyzed on one side of your body, you're going to need care from someone, and if a stroke victim, it's always the spouse, okay, almost always the spouse if they're not in a nursing home. And you start thinking again about the past as what happens when you're old, when you're disabled, and the future doesn't look good. You think about the past, and you start thinking, gee, I ate too much, I was drinking too much, I wasn't a good husband to my children, I wasn't a good spouse to my wife, and so.
So you're getting reruns of
Correct.
all the bad, I'm saying
Yes,
bad,
yes.
in quotation marks, bad things you believe you did.
Right, because the future looks bleak or hopeless.
How do you get out of that? What would you say to this patient who's asking the question?
Well, I would listen to the patient, is what I would do. Okay, because if you listen and you allow them to speak freely, first of all, just being able to say those things is therapeutic in itself. Being able to say I was a bad parent, be able to say I shouldn't have eaten so much, or I shouldn't have smoked when I was 25 years old, even though I had the stroke and I was 80. But this would happen. Okay, that is therapeutic. In the sense of someone who's quit smoking at age 30 and he has a stroke at age 80, why is he still worrying? This is 50 years ago. It shouldn't really have any effect.
But you've seen that happen.
Right, and but it happens. If you go back to Mary, okay, she went back to her past. We all do that.
Mm-hmm.
So what needs to happen then with a stroke victim? They need to have a future.
How do you do that? What else would you say to this guy?
Well, I'm not going to say anything, but there are people, there are therapists, there are occupational, physical therapists, there's the family and so forth. If you allow him, the patient can reach back into their resources and find something that is meaningful to them. And then that can be the focus of their life.
So that's a way to catapult into a future out of the past?
Right. There's a man named John Rackley who's a quadriplegic that we'll talk about later. I'll just say a brief statement about him now. I like to say he's my hero, okay? I first read about him in a disability magazine. I read about this guy who was a quadriplegic, what's called an incomplete quadriplegic. He can move his hands, okay, move his arms. And I read that he had invented over 50 devices for wheelchairs to help disabled people in wheelchairs, including this wheelchair with arms on it that he hunts and fishes with, okay? And he hunts and fishes by himself, and he shoots 200-pound deer and drags them in.
That's incredible.
It's incredible, okay? He's an incredible man, and we'll talk much more about him. So again, he has this total, death, you say. He was a healthy man. He jumped on a trampoline, broke his neck, and was paralyzed, and you'd think, he was done for life. Well, through a lot of support and his own fortitude and drive to live, he has said that life now is much better than it was before he had.
How can that be true? Or should we save the full story for a future segment?
Yes, we'll get into that later, yeah. Oh. So, again, this stroke victim or a paraplegic or a quad or something, there's still life in the person.
And that's what we have to look for.
Correct.
As caregivers, as family in particular.
Yes. A major deficit, let's say, that caregivers have is they'll pity a person. And the person will know that. Okay? And they can feel that. And that doesn't energize people. Okay? If treat the person, as a human being, then things should change.
And I imagine that we're focusing again on family here. If the family is strong and surrounds the resident or the patient with those visions of the future, saying either out loud or implicitly or explicitly, that is. A flip side of this family caregiver issue is guilt. We've had a number of questions from spouses who talked about the spouse that had had a stroke and, you know, I'm committed in sickness and in health and all of that. And some of them think about replacing the spouse or start a new life, and then they feel terribly guilty.
That's right. That happens often. And what happens then is that the spouse, the disabled spouse, is not the spouse that they married.
Of course.
Not the spouse they lived their life with. That's over. So now they're providing all this care, they're providing all this time and energy and so forth, and the spouse isn't getting better. They're getting nothing back from it. This is what happens. So then they start thinking of living their life without the spouse.
That sounds actually healthy to me.
I would say it is healthy, okay? And again, it goes back to the caregivers needing a family, okay, the village to help them so they can start creating a life without the spouse.
Emotionally without the spouse.
Correct.
Although we're not talking about necessarily getting rid of the spouse,
No.
but being there to be a caregiver, but also that's part of nurturing yourself, to have a
Absolutely.
life
Absolutely.
as the caregiver.
And again, if someone like Mary, who can get a rich and meaning life after a stroke, after having some dementia and so forth, well, what about a spouse who's in good health? Shouldn't they have a rich and meaningful life as well? Absolutely. So this is the questions like guilt, and I've heard them even say they had thoughts about killing their husband or wishing they would die, and all these things, which is actual normal feeling and thought to have.
And it's so important, I imagine, for these family caregivers to hear that word, normal.
Absolutely.
These thoughts are normal.
And if they can talk about it with somebody, it's much healthier for them.
Right, because on top of the difficulty, the actual the physical and emotional stress of caring for someone you deeply love on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis, then piling on that guilt, that just sounds unbearable.
Yes, yes.
We're running out of time for this segment. And again, this is part 3 of Emotions and the Aging Process. Dr. Ron Sepitelli, I'm Naomi Arenberg. What can you give us to take out of this segment about the role of family? Or not just the role of family caregivers, their role as caregivers, and taking care of themselves?
Yeah, you asked, there's a lot of ways I can answer that. That's what I'm thinking of right now. How do I answer that? That's a question that would take 2 or 3 shows, okay, to answer, okay? But I would say that the best thing that they can do for themselves is to have somebody that will listen to them when they're talking about their frustrations. A physical therapist said to me recently that her job is to make people better. When they don't want to be better, she feels anxious about that and guilty that she's not making them better. And then when sometimes people don't want to try to feel better, she even feels worse. So she said, my job is to make them feel better. What should I do about that? And we know we really can't make someone feel better.
Realize your own limitations.
Right.
Love does not equal limitations. You can care deeply about someone. That doesn't mean you can fix that person.
We need to, as much as possible, allow the person being cared for to guide us, to lead us. What do they need? What would be helpful for them? What do they want to do? Now, in some of these cases, they may need more coercion, let's say, to get them to do things and more support in different areas. But if they can lead, then things will be much better for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dr. Ron Sepitelli, let's give the email address so that we can get more responses, more listener questions. You can email us at info@vermontsmp.org. That's info@Vermont, S as in Sally, M as in Mary, P as in Paul, .org. VermontSMP, one word, .org. Thank you very much for watching.